This week on Grok Talk, my guests are the Reverend Jim Harden, who is the CEO of CompassCare, a pregnancy care center operation based in New York State. My second guest is Tacara McKay. She works for letthemlive.org, and she has an interesting story to tell us about Planned Parenthood. And we'll wrap it up with some clips from Ian Underwood. Stay tuned. Grok Talk starts in less than 60 seconds.
Grok Talk.
Not everyone can get up every day and look for ways to piss people off. But here at GraniteGrok.com, we do that almost every day. I can't tell you how many times someone's lost their SHIT and threatened to end us. But we're still here, pissing people off. It's almost like we enjoy it. And we've been doing it since 2006. That's almost 2 decades of news, politics, and opinion, and now podcasts, and we're just getting started. We believe in principles before parties and politicians. We defend free markets and individual liberty, and if that makes you mad, it makes us smile. We're like Grandma after she stopped caring what other people thought. If that sounds refreshing, you need to check us out. This is Steve McDonald for Granite Grok, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you. Back to another edition of Grok Talk, brought to you by GraniteGrok.com and Grok Media LLC. We have a full program this week, 2 different guests. My first guest is Reverend Jim Harden, who is the president or CEO. I've seen both. I think you're the CEO of CompassCare. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, awesome. So I have a lot of questions for you. But let's start with, tell me about CompassCare.
Yeah, CompassCare started as an organization back in 1980 as the Citizens for Public Morality, which is kind of an oxymoron these days, given the fact that a lot of politicians post-Clinton era have been talking about the distinction between public morality and private morality. Also with, the kind of novel idea that emanated from New York State governor at the time, Mario Cuomo, saying that, well, I'm personally against abortion, politically, and it's just a different matter. The organization quickly realized that the prevailing moral issue of the day, the issue upon which history would look back on and say that was the issue that defined us, was going to be abortion. And so they changed the name to Crisis Pregnancy Center and became one of the first crisis pregnancy centers in the whole movement in the United States to reach and serve women facing unplanned pregnancy, seriously considering abortion, while at the same time educating the community about the risks and evils of abortion. So we've been doing that. We reinvented ourselves, so to speak. In 2001, the board brought me on in October of 2001 and asked if I could help medicalize the organization. It had never been done before in New York State. So we kind of cracked the nut on that and became the first repeatable medical model of operation in this very hostile, what we call America's abortion capital. We created a model that, ostensibly is, likely one of the most effective models based on our data at reaching and serving women seriously considering abortion. We pioneered the concepts of a linear service model and database management relative to, performance for continuous improvement on a organization by organization, nurse by nurse basis. So we have been very effective at competing with the abortion industry, launching services initially, beta testing it in Rochester, New York, which is home to a lot of abortion human subjects testing for chemical abortion. New York State, as you know, is probably kind of the birthplace, if you will, of abortion, with Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, being born just a little south of here in Corning and starting the American Birth Control League out of New York City. So New York City is kind of like ground zero for abortion. That is America's abortion headquarters, with Planned Parenthood now, formerly Margaret Sanger's American Birth Control League, headquartered there, providing 40% of all the nation's abortions. Also, Danco Laboratories, headquartered in New York City. Danco Laboratories is responsible for bringing chemical abortion to the United States, now representing over 60% of the nation's abortions. And so we're competing head on with this multi-billion-dollar international abortion complex, while pro-abortion politicians like Kathy Hochul and Attorney General Letitia James are promoting, paying for, and protecting abortionists while trying to edge out all their competition by trying to make pro-life pregnancy centers illegal in the public square. So we've got multiple lawsuits that we're fighting just so that we can continue to fight for women and their preborn boys and girls.
In New Hampshire, we have something called Real Options. They just changed their name. They have a couple of pregnancy care centers here. They basically do the same thing. They do, all kinds of counseling with the fathers and the mothers and to teach them about being parents and counsel them, and if they choose to have an abortion, they're there to talk to them about it afterwards, which are services that Planned Parenthood doesn't offer and that you're not going to find anywhere else. And I mean, even if you have decided to have an abortion and you have it at Planned Parenthood's not going to help you with all the stress and emotional baggage that comes from that. That's why Real Options changed their name. They're like, look, we're here to help the women and the girls. That's what we're here for. If we can show you a path towards birth or adoption or parenthood, we're going to do that. So we go to their fundraiser every year and we support them. So it's interesting to know that you guys kind of broke ground on that.
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey. We now provide the lion's share of medical services, pro-life medical services, an ethical alternative for women facing unplanned pregnancy in all the major abortion hubs in New York, Rochester, Buffalo, Albany, Brooklyn, the Bronx. Brooklyn, for example, has, I don't know, 14,000 abortions every year and rising. Abortion tourism, we predicted abortion tourism would start up again. New York State, of course, was one of the first states in the union to legalize abortion 2 whole years before Roe versus Wade passed in 1973. And women would come from all over the country to get their abortions in New York State. And that was abortion tourism. And we said, well, look, if Roe versus Wade is overturned, pro-life states will regulate or outlaw abortion, which they've done, sparking additional abortion tourism into New York State. Now there are estimates that abortion is up in New York State 90% because of abortion tourism and New York State using taxpayer funds to build teleabortion online infrastructure to ship dangerous chemical abortion drugs to women in the mail in pro-life states all across the country, in violation of the Comstock Act, by the way. So women are in desperate need of ethical alternatives to empower them to actually have their babies, because I've said this a million times, not a sane woman alive actually wants to have an abortion. She feels stuck, trapped, like she's got no other choice. She needs to have an abortion. That's what she tells herself. I need to have an abortion. A study came out recently that said that most women experience what might be called buyer's remorse after having had an abortion. Many said that they felt coerced into getting an abortion for various reasons. And so our job as Christian pro-life people is to come alongside her with all the ethical medical care and comprehensive community support that she needs, like, ultrasound scans, STD testing and treatment, even chemical abortion reversal, where we can, if she changes her mind, she starts the chemical abortion process, we can actually help her reverse the effects of it and save the life of her baby. We offer all these things to her for free. And she desperately needs these. Her baby desperately needs these services. And so it's really a privilege and an honor to be part of that right here on the front lines of the abortion battle.
All right, so we have a new presidential administration. President Trump has already done some things that look very favorable to the pro-life movement, or at least the Planned Parenthood side of it, with a recent investigation into at least 9 states, I think it was, where and it was an odd angle. They're like, well, we're not going to fund you because of your DEI policies, which seems kind of backdoor to me. I mean, but if it works, it works, yeah. Right? I don't, they should be funded privately. I don't think, I've never thought taxpayers should pay for that. But it has changed the landscape. I mean, of course, the landscape seems to have been shifting a little bit in favor of women and babies. And you guys published something on March 25th about Planned Parenthood in Manhattan. Why don't you tell me about that?
Yeah, Planned Parenthood in Manhattan is essentially Planned Parenthood's flagship, or was their flagship operation. It was a $39 million building right in the heart of Manhattan. Essentially, they're claiming that they're experiencing financial difficulties. Now they've suspended surgical abortion for the last several months, and we had a hunch that they were in fact on the verge of shuttering. And it's it's not likely that the reasons they're giving are true. And I say that because the reasons they're giving that for shuttering the Manhattan location is financial. Planned Parenthood is propped up by hundreds of millions, $750 million in federal funding every single year. They get hundreds of millions of dollars from liberal states like New York. In fact, just this budget year, New York State earmarked $100.7 million to improve the infrastructure of the abortion industry. Well, so that they can sell more abortions to women in pro-life states and encourage women to travel to New York to get their abortions. So Manhattan, has been known for their, celebrity support, the protection of the of their physicians by politicians like Attorney General Letitia James and New York Governor Kathy Hochul, by creating literally what they call shield laws, insulating pro-abortion criminal physicians from any kind of liability for violating other state or federal laws. So, this is not about money. They have plenty of money. The question is what's happening. And it just so happens that they announced this closure after having, shuttered their services, several weeks beforehand, just as the New York Times came out with an expose piece talking about their malpractice. And we've been saying this for years, Steve, that the abortion industry represents serial medical malpractice. When you've got an industry that is essentially got their primary mode of service, that is chemical abortion, passed through the FDA through a loophole to avoid an investigation into the safety and efficacy of these drugs, and then it's literally been identified as a risk for hemorrhaging, for sepsis, and for death for the women. And they're saying that they're claiming it's safer than Tylenol. This is a fraud being perpetrated upon women. So this is what's being protected in New York State, and Planned Parenthood is the beneficiary of this protection, of this money, et cetera. Why are they closing? My sense is that because the health department, under the direction of Kathy Hochul, has refused to investigate Planned Parenthood, and this expose coming out of New York Times is basically saying this organization, and probably all across the country, Planned Parenthood and all the other abortionists, are actually frauds. They're actually engaging in serial medical malpractice, harming women, and certainly killing children, for money and for the benefit of getting politicians reelected. So they advocate and lobby for all this grant money, and a lot of it gets turned around and funneled back into campaign coffers, so that their politicians can get reelected. It's a scam, and it needs to stop. So, we're happy that the gray lady, the New York Times, released the expose, but I think it's a little too late. We're talking about, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of children being harmed and killed intentionally, essentially disqualified from protection under the law because simply they haven't been born yet.
We have in New Hampshire have had for a very long time very liberal abortion policy. A couple of years ago, we passed a 24-week ban, and that's pretty much a common worldwide thing. And of course, the Democrats lost their minds. But one thing we don't have still, despite a lot of effort of trying in several Republican majority legislatures, is some kind of rule-making authority, some kind of guidance that requires abortion clinics to report data on what they do on who and whatever, not private data, not personal data, just specific, the same kind of data that every other medical procedure is required to collect.
Right.
And basically the way the law was written, anybody in the state could do an abortion anywhere. That was how unregulated it was, right? What's New York like? Do they require any data collection at all?
Well, New York has changed the law relative to data collection. They have required a robust data collection, but they don't release that public data to the public because they know how damaging it can be. For example, if you look at the aggregate data with respect to the Black community and abortion, the Black community represents 14% of all abortions. 14% of all people in America. Yet they bear the burden of 40% of all America's abortions. Okay. But then if you look at the data, the peer-reviewed medical journal literature demonstrates that abortion increases a woman's risk of future preterm deliveries by 55%. With a dose effect, which means the more abortions you have, the higher risk of future preterm deliveries goes. So now if you look at the Black community in New York in terms of preterm delivery and future morbidity of future children, it's through the roof, and it crosses all socioeconomic barriers. Why is the Black community's morbidity for preterm delivery, et cetera, so high? Well, just look at abortion. It's because of abortion. But of course, you could actually demonstrate that clearly, almost cause and effect, if you had access to New York State's data. But here's what they did. They're trying to make it to obfuscate the data and to conflate miscarriage data with abortion data. And so that makes it very difficult to suss out. And they're trying to remove the ability for people to demonstrate or to document race and ethnicity with respect to patient data on abortion. Also, they're insulating abortionists and from saying, hey, you don't need to tell us any information about the women you're serving in order to protect the women, right? Well, what if these women are girls? What if they're being brought in by a man who is 35, 40 years old? What if the man is looking to buy additional chemical abortion for this girl? What if they're coming in from out of state in violation of the Mann Act? What if this girl is being trafficked, which, by the way, is a very common occurrence in New York State and New York City in particular, with all this immigration being flooding in, and New York City being a hub for sex trafficking. Think about Jeffrey Epstein. Who was the abortionist for the Jeffrey Epstein sex crime syndicate? Nobody's asking these questions. Well, it's right here and it's all this crime. I'm telling you, the abortion industry is the glove that covers the fingerprints of the sex crime industry, and it's centered around places like New York and New York City. They don't want the state and the nation and the people in the nation to understand what's actually going on with the data, because so many crimes are being committed that it would lead back to, I believe it would lead back to politicians like Attorney General Letitia James and Kathy Hochul, who get elected on the coffers of the abortion industry.
We were listening to Northern New England Planned Parenthood was complaining. They always complain. They've been doing it for years. They don't have enough money. They don't have enough money. They don't have enough money. So we went in and we dug through their 990s, and we were looking at all this thing. And we're like, well, you got a lot of money. You're spending like $1 million on lobbying politicians so they'll give you more money. You've got tons of money. It's not a fair playing field at all. You guys are at a huge disadvantage. I know that at least one of your centers, the one in Buffalo, was firebombed, right?
Right. We were firebombed by pro-abortion Marxist Antifa insurgents. And I say that because I just finished writing an article for my Newsmax column, helping people understand the common threads that are throughout all of these various what appear to be, or what the legacy media wants people to think are, just common, protests that are bubbling up naturally, like pro-Palestine protests. And now that we had the transgender activities and the other types of, BLM and, defund the police protests. Now you've got protests that are engaged around Elon Musk and Tesla. But yet they're all using the same black bloc dress code. They're all using the same red lettered graffiti with the same Antifa propaganda about capitalism and a capitalistic oppression and all these kinds of things. Well, that was what happened when we were attacked after Roe versus Wade was, actually just before Roe versus Wade was overturned in June of 2022. This was what Antifa does. They simply are piggybacking off of these kind of left-wing causes in order to foment these kinds of protests. And then they see these protests with professional violent aggressors using Molotov cocktails and breaking glass and lighting fires to destabilize society. Their whole goal, and if you look at what's happening, and this isn't just coming from me, this is coming from Rich Higgins, the late Rich Higgins. He was he was irregular warfare expert out of the Pentagon, and he saw this back from the first Trump administration in 2017 and 18. This is an international insurgency that's designed to dismantle the nation-state system to pave the way for a global communism. And this is a Marxist-based communist insurgency that attacks the moral framework of the nation and the free market of the nation that buttresses the nation state system. By the way, one of the reasons why they want to attack Israel is because Israel represents that nation state system in the Middle East. So it just so happens that pregnancy centers, they don't care about abortion rights. They just care about attacking organizations that represent the moral framework that buttresses that constitutional rule of law nation state system. And pregnancy centers happen to be those Christian organizations, and churches too, by the way. Same time they were attacking churches, represent that moral framework. And they were insisting that we were enslaving women, forcing them to become a permanent socioeconomic underclass. You can see it. James Revenge communicates. James Revenge is a front group for Antifa. So this is the kind of thing that we see happening. They don't care about abortion. They don't care about pro-life. They don't care about Tesla. They don't care about pro-Palestine or anything like that. They just care about whether or not they can manipulate the weak-minded, disaffected, publicly educated, people who are sensitized to communist left-wing ideology, and then seed that those ostensibly peaceful protests with violent professional aggressors, and they use Molotov cocktails and they engage in this kind of tactic. So I think it's going to behoove the Trump administration and Pam Bondi and Kash Patel to help people connect the dots that these attacks on pro-life organizations like ours comes in waves, and their recruitment tactics to continue to foment more and more violence to topple this nation state system and then of course they use what I call political transference to blame their enemy for the crimes they're actually committing to destabilize the country. So it's really fascinating times that we're living in, and right now Elon Musk and President Trump are the target of Antifa activity.
You know what kills me about this whole, abortion is tied to obviously the destruction of marriage, making sure women remain single. Young men have been under assault. You have the entire incel culture that's been created. And yet the data all shows that married women have better sex lives and are happier than single women. And I'm just like, why don't people talk about that more? Why isn't that data everywhere? I've been married for over 30 years. A successful marriage in a loving family is like the best environment for having babies, for raising children, for making productive. I hear your thunder from your storm.
Yes,
productive members of society.
that's the
Yep.
Lord underscoring the importance of what you're saying.
Well, it's true, right?
The foundation of the foundation of all stable civilized order is the family unit: a male father, a female mother, with male boys and female girls. It's insane that I even have to put it that way, right? But the next generation of healthy citizen is born and raised in a healthy family that understands that we are endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights. We're not endowed by our government with fabricated rights, and it's that's been forgotten. And communist kind of Marxist ideologues insist that the government creates rights and meets them out, and that and then they make Christian kind of Judeo-Christian moral framework out to be this patriarchal oppressive structure, and it's not. It actually the truths of Scripture about the fact that we're made in God's image are the basis for human dignity. We are inherently valuable. And therefore, by virtue of the shed blood of Christ, according to Scripture, we are infinitely valuable from the moment of conception to natural death. This has policy ramifications for things like abortion, IVF, surrogacy, marriage, childbearing. All these things are understood, if understood properly, will be protected by government and not undermined by government.
All right. So you guys were, I know the Buffalo incident was newsworthy, I would say. You've had cyber attacks. You've had other incidences where your other centers have been attacked.
Yes. We've been the target of Antifa firebombing in Buffalo. Also, additional graffiti attacks similar to Antifa red graffiti lettering, claiming that we're liars. Very common claim from Antifa. We've been the target of cyber terrorists, recently, and we've also been the target of weaponized legislation from pro-abortion legislation in legislators in New York, including New York Governor Kathy Hochul, who, by the way, called us Neanderthals while signing a piece of legislation a week after we were firebombed to investigate us instead of the firebombers. We've been sued by Letitia James. Letitia James encouraged Google to censor us, which they did. Very illegal, by the way. Letitia James filed a lawsuit against us claiming that we're committing consumer fraud against women by telling them the truth that chemical abortion is bad for women and can be reversed. And we actually do it. We have our lived experience is 90% effective. And by the way, the FDA says it can be done and very effectively as well. So, they want to push us out of the public square. They launched an initiative called the Empire State Freedom Initiative after New York Proposition 1 was passed in November, making abortion a fundamental human right, saying that they're going to be looking for violations of civil rights. And by the way, violation of a civil right for abortion means that they can essentially target pro-life pregnancy centers for conspiring to violate a woman's civil right by refusing to refer or provide an abortion for her. This is very dangerous waters that we're swimming in, and it's very important here on the front lines to hold the line against this evil. So we've been. I think we've got 7 lawsuits going on right now just to be able to protect our ability to do what we do, and helping women have their babies. So yeah, it's very, very difficult. I think the Antifa traded firebombs for lawyers and politicians probably around 2023. So we predicted it was going to happen. We've got fantastic lawyers out of the Thomas More Society, public interest law firm based in Chicago, Alliance Defending Freedom, and others. We've got a lot of friends, a lot of allies. And we're doing the right thing. We are the ones that understand what the definitions of good and right are, and we will not compromise with the evil machinations of pro-abortion politicians.
Well, to say you're over the target would be an understatement, because you're taking about as much flack as you can possibly take in a black hole of a blue state, which has a lot of red areas in it. I know it does, but all the cities are so large, and of course New York City just crushes everything when it comes to state elections.
That's so true.
Elections. It's so true. And then that's why we've been very strong in our opposition to any sort of national popular vote, because New York City would just erase all of New England, just completely. We would no longer have any say whatsoever. So I get
That's
where
right.
you're at. It's a terrible position to be in.
In some ways, I would say it's a privilege to be on the front lines. I mean, Scripture does warn us. I mean, the Apostle Peter warns that difficult times will come. But he says, don't be surprised at the fiery ordeal among you. But you're going to be given opportunities to defend the hope that is within you. And there's lots of different ways that we're given opportunities to defend the hope that is within us. And the hope that is within us is the big theological concept about what it means to be human under God, and how we've fallen and how God is rescuing us from our fallenness into sin. And that means that we are as Christians required and even destined by God to perform good deeds in protecting other people and bringing other people into salvation and into life, both physical life and eternal life. And that's why Christians are on the front lines, have always been on the front lines of systemic injustice. And abortion happens to represent the biggest systemic injustice in the history of mankind, with over 73 million abortions worldwide every single year. This is a huge problem that Christians are able to speak the truth into. And I think abortion simply represents a fundamental misunderstanding about what it means to be human under God. And we've got this wonderful platform when we're being targeted and persecuted to speak the truth about that. And so, I think in some ways it's a privilege.
All right, Reverend Jim Harden, how do people reach out to you, find your organization, or donate to support you?
Oh, thank you very much. Yes. If people want to learn more about how they can support saving women and babies from abortion on the front lines of the abortion battle, they can go to CompassCareCommunity.com. That's CompassCareCommunity.com. Or if they want to join a Walk for Life, which is the largest pro-life event, I think, in the Northeast, they can go to CompassCareWalk.com. That's CompassCareWalk.com.
Reverend Jim Harden, thank you for your time, and enjoy your thunderstorm.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you'll make time to check out all of our podcasts, brought to you by Grok Media LLC and GraniteGrok.com. Mondays at 8 p.m., it's Right Side Up. On Tuesdays, it's our live show from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time, Granite State Live. Wednesdays, tune in at 8 o'clock for Justice for All. Thursdays, 8 p.m., it's Grok Talk. Friday at 8 p.m., it's Manch Talk. Saturday, again at 8 p.m., The New England Take. And Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, it's Vermont Daily Chronicle Television. We are your source for local podcasts, news, politics, and opinion, brought to you by Grok Media LLC and GraniteGrok.com.
Grok Talk.
Next up, Tacara McKay from LetThemLive.org. Welcome back to Grok Talk, brought to you by GraniteGrok.com and Grok Media LLC. My second guest today is Tacara McKay, and she comes to us from LetThemLive.org. It's also, you have Let Them Live Action as well, I believe.
Yeah, that's just like our official nonprofit.
Okay, great. So she's got an interesting story to share, but before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about LetThemLive.org, what you guys do, which is unique and interesting, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to share with you. Thank you so much for having me on as well. So Let Them Live is a nonprofit organization that helps abortion-minded women confidently choose life. So usually it's women that come to us on their own free will that, find us online, or sometimes are referred to us by pregnancy sidewalk counselors. So these are women that have scheduled abortions because they feel pressured into the abortion, usually because of financial reasons and not having a support system. A lot of the times the partner's absent or pressuring them into it. So these are women that just don't have that community to rally around them. And so we come alongside these women and we counsel them and we crowdfund. So we raise the means, we figure out, what they need to feel confident and secure to bring their baby into the world. And so, we just walk beside these women and, help them choose life, which is ultimately the choice that they really want to make, is to choose life. And so, I always say Let Them Live is very unique because we actually have donors from both sides of the aisle. We have donors that identify as pro-choice, donors that identify as pro-life. So this is something we can come together on and be like, okay, this woman wants to have her baby. How can we help her?
Right. And so I'm looking at your 990s and all this good stuff, and sounds like a great organization. And it's a 73% of women have abortions due to financial burden, and Let Them Live offers them financial support so that they can choose life instead, which is kind of neat because, I was talking to a gentleman earlier who runs pregnancy care centers in New York State. I live in New Hampshire, and we have some here called Real Choices. I believe that's right. And they do, they do the counseling, and they do, if a woman decides to have an abortion, they do the after support, the emotional support and the medical support if they need it. And, they teach them to be good parents if they want to be parents, if they choose life. They, counsel them on the benefits of marriage and staying married and work and all these good things. But they really don't, they don't provide other forms of financial support. So it's kind of neat. And that was what kind of caught my attention, is just that one line. I'm like, that's really excellent, because really that is the problem, right? I mean, these are women who feel trapped. They don't think they have any other choice. And yet there are these organizations everywhere that are, bad-mouthed and attacked and graffitied. And, if you have a physical bricks and mortar presence, they're going to come after you. But you've recently reported on some interesting developments regarding Planned Parenthood, and something where you appear to have a shared interest.
Yeah. So, I'm sure, as you've heard, the abortion pill is becoming very popular online. So women are now not having to go into clinics and get the pill. They are now able to just place an order online. A lot of these pills are coming from like the black market, like people that don't have license to be prescribing these kinds of medications. And they are, a lot of the times just sending these pills to these women's houses. And it is extremely dangerous because, one, you're supposed to go to the clinic and have an ultrasound done to tell you how far into pregnancy you are. Because according to the FDA, they say that the pill really should not be used past 12 weeks, like the first trimester, because then your risk of having an incomplete abortion and just the abortion not being successful goes up. And with that comes women being left at home, oftentimes hemorrhaging, risking infection because they don't know what's normal, how much they're supposed to be bleeding, how far along into pregnancy they were. And then, unfortunately, we do have women that are a lot further into pregnancy and they're being told that, it's fine if you take this pill. It's just safe. It's like Tylenol. So these women are at home by themselves, and it's very, very dangerous. And so there was a recent article that had come out by a director from Planned Parenthood. They had gotten a quote from her because they were looking into a case of a woman in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, who had ordered these pills online, allegedly. I think there was an affidavit or something. So the mom or her were saying that they had obtained these pills. And she was past 15 weeks, 6 days, because that was the limit at the Planned Parenthood that was going to perform the abortion. And so she couldn't have that procedure done. So she said, oh, let me just order these online. So, she had done the abortion, had the baby, and then she ended up just putting the baby in like a trash bag and putting it in the garbage or in a box or something like that. Yeah, it's absolutely, it's horrific.
We
Yeah,
just had a
and
baby
so
found dead, just left somewhere in New Hampshire. And we have safe havens, a lot of states do. Fire stations, they keep trying to add locations where people can just bring the baby. You don't even have to do anything, just give them the baby and you can leave. And it's just so tragic.
it really is. Yeah, I can't imagine. I have 3 kids of my own, and I just can't imagine, one, aborting them, and then 2, just kind of throwing them away like trash. I know the other side likes to use the phrase fetus to kind of dehumanize the preborn child, but in all reality, we know it's a baby, and it's literally just defenseless, and it's just terrible. But so back to the Planned Parenthood director, she had come out and said, it is very unsafe for women to be accessing these pills online. And granted, she may be just saying this because Planned Parenthood in a way is maybe losing business because they're not having women come to the actual clinic. I'm not 100% sure, because I will say we have had Planned Parenthood workers, very few, but we have had Planned Parenthood workers that have referred women to our organization. So that being said, there are, I think, women, whether they're directors, assistants, that truly believe they're doing good for women and they're working at these clinics. So she may have a genuine concern for women. But like I said, we're not sure. But regardless, this is something that both sides should be able to come together on, because we should both acknowledge that women accessing the pill online like this is very, very dangerous. And if you say that you care about women, then this should be very, very concerning, whether you're pro-choice or pro-life, so this is something that really needs to be talked about.
Well, yeah, and I'm glad we connected because, telehealth is one of the good things that came out of the whole COVID business. And people who use it, there's lots of ads for how you can access physicians and dentists and all kinds of people online. And I think that's fabulous because it opens up the market to competition. And wherever you have competition, you have the potential to lower prices, and a lot of it. Telehealth also means that there's almost anybody can come up and say, well, I have this pill that'll help you do this thing. And of course, there's all the hims and hers ads, and they all seem pretty legit, but fly by night, whatever. People are going to try to make money. And if a woman is really desperate and she doesn't have a lot of money, this is a great opportunity to take advantage of that. Are there any statistics on how many women are basically aborting babies this way as opposed to using a clinic like Planned Parenthood?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact numbers. I do know that since Roe v. Wade was overturned, we have seen a spike in the abortion pill use of women obtaining them online. I do know that the pill, even before Roe v. Wade was overturned, was the number one common way that women were having abortions, going to the clinics. So I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I do know within the last year or so, the spike, the increase in women obtaining pills online and stories. And, we have some OBGYNs that work with a lot of different pro-life nonprofits to kind of consult them in that sense, so that we're giving out factual, accurate medical information. And some of these doctors, work in ERs, and they've said that they have seen a rise in cases of women coming into the emergency room hemorrhaging, and turns out that they had taken the abortion pill at home. Turns out they're still, have parts of the baby in them or the placenta, and that's what's causing the sepsis and the infection. And so it really is a crisis that needs to be talked about. And, I always say it is very unfortunate that the other side, not everybody on the other side, but just the abortion industry as a whole likes to push out this narrative how safe the pill is, and like I said before, like just like Tylenol, so it's fine. So these women are believing this and thinking it's fine if they order these pills online. They don't know the risks, and they think that this abortion industry, has their best interest in mind. But in reality, you do get those people that are in it for the money and for the profit. And you see videos circulating on all the big platforms, TikTok, Instagram, and it's just some random woman that's like, hey, I want to help my fellow women out. I got a bunch of abortion pills. Give me your address and I'll ship them to you. And it's like, if they're willing to go through all of that, who even knows what kind of pill you're getting? Is this even an abortion pill? Is this laced with something? Like, it's not like some Tylenol that you're buying. It is so much more than that. And it's horrific that a lot of the times women are just left in the dark and like truly think that it's no big deal when in reality it is.
Well, it may be improving now with the border closing and, a little bit more work on dealing with cartels and things, but fentanyl's been showing up in everything.
Yeah.
And anybody who even has a little bit of attention to the news and the modern culture should be aware of that. But obviously they're not, because people continue to die from fentanyl overdoses from things that shouldn't have fentanyl in them. So I would definitely say there's a good conversation. Something that struck me when I read this piece about Planned Parenthood saying that these were unsafe is whether or not there was any of the really, really extreme abortion people who tried to push back on that. And I didn't find anything. But it just struck me as interesting. There's like a story within that story where somebody from Planned Parenthood said, you shouldn't be ordering these abortion pills online, even if they meant you should come to us. And I can see people who would be like, oh, you hate women. You know the deal, right? I
Yeah.
didn't find any, but that's just sort of the narrative that you get. And I'm excited to hear you say that there are people working in Planned Parenthood who are referring women to pregnancy
Yeah.
care centers. I work on the center right as a blogger and a media person, and most of the people that we encounter are the people that we see in the news, and they're pretty hostile. A lot of the
Yeah.
representatives in our legislature who are Democrats, they vote as a caucus. You are not allowed to think any other way. So when you hear that there's people inside who are like, you know what, this woman needs some help, we're going to ask you to give her a
Yeah.
hand. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's crazy because we've had to keep that private too, for the names of these employees too, because like you said, you just really don't know how hostile people are going to be and how they're going to react. And so it's like, I'm assuming that some of these workers are maybe kind of doing this like on the down low, trying to keep it quiet. But, it really does just go to show like they do want to help women. And that's the thing is we have, within the pro-life movement too, we have and then there were none. I don't know if you've heard of that organization, but it's abortion clinic workers that are leaving the industry and are
Okay.
kind of speaking out about how corrupt the industry is and how they're kind of trained from the inside to sell abortions. And so there are people that start out with really, really good intentions, and then obviously they realize, okay, this is just like a money-making giant. This is profit over people is really, really what it is, pitting women against their own preborn children.
Well, when Leanna Wen was the president of Planned Parenthood, she made it quite clear that abortion was their core business, and they didn't like her saying that publicly, but it's
Yeah.
true.
We all
A
know.
lot of no, right, yeah, a lot of those other services they outsource, and if they can outsource them to a pregnancy care center, please do that.
Yeah.
What obviously this message needs to get out to women. They need to be made to understand that while they still can choose to do this, they need to know what the risks are. Do you guys do anything to try and improve the media landscape or the information landscape with regard to abortion pills by mail or, chemical abortions?
Yeah, so let them live personally. We try not to get too involved because it's really sad, but things can get political super quickly. And just because we
Mhm.
have such a variety of donors, we do try and not be too political, and this is considered a political issue. So a lot of the times what we'll do is we're partnered with tons of other like pro-life organizations like Live Action. I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but they expose the abortion industry, and I know they've talked about it and a lot of pro-life leaders. And so we will definitely direct our followers and donors to other platforms to get their information. And then even just doing interviews like this, like I've had a couple, and just really talking on the issue. I had sent this information out, and I was like, hey, like I would love to talk about this, because it's just a huge problem that I think people don't even realize. And like I said, like we can find some common ground here. Like I love common ground, especially with Let Them Live. Like I said, we have pro-choice and pro-life donors. So like we can come together on some things. And this truly is a test of like, do you actually care about women? Because if you did, then you should be against this. We should all be rallying together to end this. This should be illegal. This should be a crime to be selling these pills online. And, ultimately, I get the black market exists, and it may always exist, but it should not be encouraged. It should not be, we should not have I've seen other big abortion supporters like speaking out saying this is great. Like no, we need to come together, and women need to know the risks.
Well, we will absolutely help spread this message, and I will happily send emails and copies of this to legislators, and I'll send them to Planned Parenthood of New Hampshire and Planned Parenthood of New England, and ask if they have a comment. I mean, are they interested in protecting women from this, or is this just something that doesn't interest them? So we'll give that a whirl and see how it goes. Most of the time when they see my email address, they just delete it. I'm going to have a good subject line.
No, like I said, like this is truly a test here. Like, how much do you really care about women? You say you have women's best interest in mind, so this is time to speak up.
All right, well, that's pretty much all we need to cover. I want to thank you again, Tacara McKay, for spending some time talking to us today, and you enjoy the rest of your week and everything that follows.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
Not everyone can get up every day and look for ways to piss people off. But here at GraniteRock.com, we do that almost every day. I can't tell you how many times someone's lost their SHIT and threatened to end us. But we're still here, pissing people off. It's almost like we enjoy it. And we've been doing it since 2006. That's almost 2 decades of news, politics, and opinion, and now podcasts, and we're just getting started. We believe in principles before parties and politicians. We defend free markets and individual liberty, and if that makes you mad, it makes us smile. We're like Grandma after she stopped caring what other people thought. If that sounds refreshing, you need to check us out. This is Steve McDonald for Granite Rock, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you.
Rock Talk.
But Granite Rock, your relationship to them, you should. That's an interesting thing. I've sent the videos over. I think they're probably putting them somewhere, and they're linking it somewhere. But I didn't know you had what your connection was to them. Or did you create it? Were you part of creating Granite Rock?
No. It was already there, and at some point, I ran into Steve and Skip, who run it, and they saw something I wrote. And they said, you should write more for us. And they're great. They're just like, because I don't always agree with them. And in fact, my running joke with Skip is, he'll be like, Ian makes my head hurt, but in a good way, right? Because I will say things and he will like, I don't want this
to be true.
True, but it is. Yeah. No, so what am I supposed to do? So they've been wonderful because, they're conservatives. I'm a mathematician, is what I am, and so I write this stuff.
I'm glad you didn't say libertarian. I really like that.
So I write this stuff, and whether they agree with it or not, they're like, say what you want to say. Yeah. And so they've been great, and so I didn't have to make up a website. I don't have to do anything. I just go and I write something. I put it in WordPress.
No, I like a so to speak, a paper, a news source. Where the conversation is obviously independent, not cloned, and not whatever bought in,
Yeah.
You get as Candace Owens getting thrown out because she doesn't toe this exact whatever thing. I like that. Yeah. There's an element of that.
And they're great about that. You can disagree with them, and they are not going to censor you. They are not going to tell you can't say something. They want to hear what you have to say.
Is your life safe now?
Independent media for New Hampshire, New England, the nation, and the world. GraniteRock.com. Everything's free, but then it's not. Please feel free to support us by finding the donate button on any page at granitegrok.com.